I would like to acknowledge that this video is being filmed on the traditional lands of the Wurrundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander or First Nations people who may be watching this video today. Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner, and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a Books Beside My Bed video where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading, and while I read a lot of things this week, I did try and pick things that were fairly quick and easy and short to get through because it's been one of those weeks. And by one of those weeks, I mean I had parent-teacher goal-setting conferences this week over 2 nights, so that meant my workday extended to 7 p.m. So not a lot of reading happened on those nights. Alright, so this is my reading wrap up from the 27th of February until the 4th of March. I read a total of 10 things this week. That equated to approximately 1,324 pages, although the page count is a little bit off this week because one of the books I had to estimate the page count, so be aware of that. And I am currently at 107 books read for the whole year. As I said, most of these things were short stories or novellas. There is one. So the first thing that I read this week was Katee Roberts' Patreon short for February, which was a Snow Queen retelling. It was a sapphic retelling. It was super short, and it was about Clara, who ends up going to the Snow Queen's castle in order to rescue her fiance and ends up trading her life for his. And it is short and steamy and, in true Katee Roberts style, very fun. I also got an early release copy of The Dragon's Bride by Katee Roberts, which is the next book in her Deal with the Demon series. I think the series is called. If I've got that wrong, I'll fix it up on the screen. This one has been hinted at for ages. It has the most gorgeous cover. Like, it's stunning. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was really fun. So this is about Briar and Sol. Briar is a woman who enters into a deal with a demon, and this deal entails her being auctioned off to one of the leaders of the various monster faction groups, sort of in this parallel universe to Earth, for 7 years of marriage. She's had quite a few things happen in her life that require this to happen, and part of the deal with the demon is that he will take care of an ex-partner who was horribly abusive. So be aware of that going into it, because that all occurs in the first part of the book. So Briar enters into this arrangement, and the only stipulation is that she is in the marriage for 7 years. There's no requirement for anything else other than that. But as she begins to spend more time with Sol, who is the leader of the dragons in this world, who are very humanoid dragons because their race has evolved over time, eventually she begins to see that perhaps he's not quite a monster. And this is pretty much a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And if you don't believe me, there is a gigantic library, including a very Beauty and the Beast library scene, and I was sold. Then I read Moth by Mayne, which is the most recent release in the Monstrous series. It's book 5, and it came out last weekend, and I was so excited because I've been waiting for this book, because Moth has been a side character in a couple of the last books, and he has this unrequited crush on one of the other characters who has already found his partner, and I was just waiting to see what was going to happen with Moth, and I'm so happy with what happened. So this is an monster romance series. It is set in a very dystopian type world where there has been a sort of breach between the monsters world and the human world, and monsters have been coming through, and everything has, you know, sort of devolved from there. And Moth is tentative friends with a group of raiders living in the wastes. One of the leaders of this group of raiders has been missing for a long time. And Charlie, who is the other hero in this story, is passing by this raider camp. And Charlie had at one point in a previous book been captured by monsters and was held in a basic fight ring where they pitted humans against monsters. And he had actually met this missing leader who had been one of the other captives. And so when he comes across this raider camp with his friends, he wants to stop, and he wants to let them know and pass on a message that he had been given. That the leader is okay, that they don't need to go and look for him straight away. He'll make his way back when he can. Anyway, so they go in there, and obviously we're combining a lot of the first 2 books with the 3rd and 4th books now. So we're mixing a lot of the characters, which is really, really cool. And I'm not giving away specifics because, one, my brain, but also because I think this is a series that is well worth reading in order. Anyway, suffice to say that the raider camp is very keen to go after their leader, and they want to send someone else, but instead Moth offers to go because he happens to be there. He's visiting the camp, and people don't want him to go by himself. Moth is half human, half monster, We don't know the full extent of what makes him a monster, but we do know that he has a very unique appearance, and you can sort of see on the cover that he kind of has this almost ethereal type of appearance, and Charlie ends up offering to go with him. And so the two set off on this walking road trip across the middle of the US, and Moth is not happy to have company, and Charlie is just a pansexual delight. He is honestly just such a fun character. I love him. I'm so glad he got his book, and I'm so glad it's with Moth, because Moth eventually begins to open up and we realize that Moth is actually quite young. Moth is actually one of the youngest characters that we have met in the series so far, and he has a lot of insecurities. There's so many tropes in this. You have cage fights, you have the walking road trip. I'm referring to it as the walking road trip because it's a road trip story, but there's no transportation. There is only one bed. There is a virgin hero. There is the most gorgeous pet, well, monster pet that they find during this book, and it was great. But if you have any triggers, there is a cannibal cult, there is a horrible, horrible father, and various instances of people being captured and tortured or mistreated throughout the story. So be aware of that going into it, but I loved this installment. I think it might be my favorite. And then I read another short. This was Icebound by Tiffany Roberts. This one is about Anna and Nelladrum, and you have Anna, who is living by herself after the death of her husband and her child, and it's the middle of a snowstorm, and she sees someone walking through the snowstorm who then knocks on her door, and she's obviously very reluctant to let him in, but when she does, she sort of offers him a place to stay in the barn, and so on and so forth, and eventually we see a relationship develop between the two of them. And Nelladrum himself has a touch of magical realism around him, so whether or not you want to believe he is something that he's not, but at the forefront he is a storyteller, and he begins to tell Anna stories. So short, sweet, very cool. And then there was another short story that was attached to the end of it, which was an extension of their story. I also read First Class Love by Shay Sanders. This is another novella. This one is about Camilla and Darius, who meet in an airport after their flights are cancelled and they decide to have a one-night stand. It's short, it's steamy, very fun. I really enjoyed it. I also read Can I Come Over by Whitney G, and I can't remember who I heard recommending this. This is about Christina and Dane. Christina is an erotic romance author, and she is on this app for pen pals, and she ends up having this I don't think it's a very healthy relationship with this guy online who critiques her work. And as it turns out, this person's name is Dane. He happens to be her father's best friend, but they don't know that they're each other because they're using pseudonyms. He is initially quite scathing about her writing, but eventually helps her out, and then they decide to meet up, and she's the one to realize really quickly who he is and sort of ghosts him, which pisses him off even more. So I'm not quite sure how I felt about this one. Like, the story itself was great, it was very steamy, and if you like a dad's best friend sort of trope, then it's fine, but it took me a while to warm to Dane just because he was not always the nicest person. And then I switched to Evie Mitchell because I'm trying to get through her backlist. I'm nearly done, I think, which is amazing, but also sad. And I read the 11th book in the Capricorn Cove series, which is Meatload, and this one is a companion to some of the last few books in the series because they all cross over, and we got snippets of other books in this one, but from different characters' perspectives, which I really liked. So this one is about Hannah and Malik, and Hannah has a podcast, and we first heard part of this story in New Year, New You, because Hannah and her podcast partner were given a challenge to push them outside their comfort zone. We got the friend's story, and this time we're getting Hannah's, and she is going to this meatload therapy in a local commune, which basically entails dancing around naked and having a massage and being wrapped up in all sorts of furs and things. And it's really, really outside her comfort zone. But when she gets there, she finds that Malik, who is a friend, someone she knows who is attracted to her but hasn't told her, is there because he mistakenly signed up for something else. So he does the exact same thing, and it's hilarious. Malik is a police officer, but he's also an absolute sweetheart of a character. He's a bigger hero, and he was just so delightful as he tries to get Hannah to open up to him. She has touch aversion, so she's never really been in a relationship, and she finds that quite stressful, but she also finds that Malik's presence is comforting and calming to her, and she wants to pursue something with him. After that, I read Beach Party, which is Tales from Capricorn Cove, and these are short stories that sort of follow some of the characters from the first 4 books in the series. I've read all of those and they were really fun. They just revisit a lot of the couples and we see them now with kids or dealing with a pandemic world, and it was great because we get to see them dealing with the next stages in their lives, and they keep popping up in later books as well, which makes it really fun. Then because of Brie, I read the Big Boys books 1 to 4 by Cassie Mint. She had recommended them in a video because I think she had gone down a Cassie Mint rabbit hole, and I thought I would try them out. These ones were just okay for me. They were perfectly fine and enjoyable, and I enjoyed reading them. All the heroines in these stories are, pretty sure all the heroines in these stories are virgins, or at least 3 out of the 4 are, if not all of them. So that's not always my favorite thing. And in fact, for some reason this week, I had a lot of books with virgin either heroes or heroines. These ones are all about bigger heroes. So you have Big Boss, Big Biker, Big Boxer, and Big Baker. And they're all really fun. So Big Boss, I think, was a best friend's dad romance. Big Biker is about a woman who is being pushed into an arranged marriage by her asshole of a father. Excuse my language, but he was horrible. And a biker who happens to also be a private investigator crosses paths with her in that moment and is very intrigued by her and ends up helping her out of that situation. Big Boxer is about a journalist who writes an article on her favorite boxer, but has recognized that probably his heart isn't in it anymore. And then he goes to confront her, which is, you know, quite intimidating for her, but they end up working that out. And then Big Baker was probably my favorite one because it's about a woman who works in a hotel as a cleaner, and she's also a mural artist, and she loves the pastries and the cooking of the head chef of the restaurant. And as an homage to him, she paints this beautiful food-inspired mural on his home. He recognizes that, and then he works out who it is, and he begins leaving her treats, and it's just amazing. So I really liked that last one. It was so fun. And then finally, the last thing that I read this week, because Sierra Simone dropped a book that I was not expecting, and it was part of a 30-book release that authors have released for free. And it is a gender-bent Robin Hood FFM retelling set in the contemporary day in the same world as New Camelot and potentially Thornchapel, and I loved it. I loved it so much. So you have Marion, who is a young woman who has always had a crush on Robin Locksley, or Locks, who is another woman who, after a brief romantic interlude between the two of them, leaves Marion and goes off to war and then doesn't talk to her for another 5 years. So we flash forward 5 years and Marion has recognized that she is submissive, and she's gone to a club to find a dom, and there she meets Rafe de Lacy, who is the Sheriff of Nottingham character. He happens to be in Sherwood because he's trying to track down Locks, because the two of them used to work together. They were both former military. I think he's CIA, she was NSA, but Locks has stolen state secrets and is now wanted for treason. And so he's trying to hunt her down, and he knows that Locks is hung up on Marion. And it turns out that Rafe and Locks had also had a relationship in the past. And the whole thing is messy, and in true Sierra Simone style, it is steamy and hot and just great. And you feel for all of the characters, like you are connected to all of them. You want them all to be happy in the end. I was so glad to end the reading week on that book because it was so good. All right, so those are the things that I read this week. In the comments, I'd love to know if you have read any of them or if you're planning on picking them up. Otherwise, feel free to share something that you have read. If you want to let me know that you're here but you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to leave a bow and arrow emoji down below as an homage to the original Robin Hood. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, everyone.